Now, Judges Matter has called on Phahlane to immediately step down. The organization's Alison Tilley joins us for more. Alison, we've seen today's developments. First, what do you make of this case? And from your perspective at the Judges Matter, how significant is this development for the judiciary?
I think it's a really watershed moment. I mean, we haven't seen before a judge appearing in court as an accused, and more particularly appearing in court as an accused in a case where the allegation is that the judge has received payments as a bribe. So I think this is it's certainly a very sad day, but it's something that we really, I think, have to see as a watershed, as a moment where we're now dealing with things at a different level than perhaps we have previously.
Yeah. As members of the public, we expect judges to be impartial and trustworthy as well. But when a judge stands accused of bribery relating to a church power struggle, what does that do to public confidence, especially in our judicial system?
Well, I have to say I'm very concerned about that. I mean, over the last 6 months, there have been a number of allegations about judges and magistrates giving strange decisions, possibly, being bribed. And I think that certainly raised the level of concern. This, I think, is different territory, in that we actually have a judge in the dock. I think it must raise concern. It must cause people to worry about the judicial system and whether they're receiving a fair shake when they are in court.
As we also track reactions from the public, we also find that many viewers are quite curious. Is 50,000 Rand bail for a High Court judge facing corruption charges typical? Or does this then raise questions about whether judicial officers receive more favourable treatment than ordinary accused persons in court?
Well, it's not typical in the sense that we don't really have a typical case where a judge is released on bail. What I think we do have is a loss of confidence in the system of bail completely. It's always been controversial, and I think people have always struggled to understand why you would arrest somebody and then let them go. I think that we are seeing at this point a real concern that if people are arrested, that you really can't trust why they're being released, and that the bail may be simply a way of letting them out of jail ahead of trial. I think we have a lot of work to do on the question of bail and perhaps reform of the bail system. People don't understand it and they don't trust it.
Yeah. Also interesting is that Judge Phahlane and her son were charged together. Alison, how common is it for relatives, especially of judicial officers, to become entangled in the same alleged corruption networks? And does this complicate the ethics picture even more?
Well, I certainly have never seen this. It's something that's just completely novel. I think we do have to think about matters. I mean, we've certainly had matters in which a judge president recently was sanctioned because he was presiding over a case in which a former client was one of the parties. I mean, it should be obvious that that is the kind of case in which you have to recuse yourself. You have a conflict of interest, and that must be the reason that you step back. It is absolutely not clear to me how that would not have been the case here. If a member of your family is involved in a matter as one of the litigants, it should be obvious that you can't sit as a presiding judge. Perhaps that was not clear. I don't know. The facts involving that may be in some way different, but it's anomalous and it is very, very unusual.
Yeah, it's quite unusual. But when looking at this particular case, the charges stem from the IPHC succession saga, a long-running, even violent and deeply contested dispute here. Alison, how does a judge become entangled in something as fraught and politically charged as a church succession battle?
Well, the answer is that they don't. It's completely unacceptable for a judge to be involved in a matter, whether it's a member of their family involved or whether they're receiving payments in relation to that matter. I mean, sometimes, it may be the judges are over scrupulous and a party will claim some kind of bias and a judge will immediately recuse themselves. We do see that. But certainly in a case where there is a family member involved and then payment involved, it's difficult to see how this case arose.
Yeah, but will it even push judges to step aside or to recuse themselves in instances like this? Would they be moved or compelled to do that?
They should be recusing themselves. There's no doubt about that. I think that's perhaps because you spoke about two things: stepping aside and recusing yourself. Recusing yourself, yes. The question of stepping aside, I think, is perhaps a more complex one.
Yeah.
As to when an allegation has been made, at what point do you step aside? But I think, there is a process for that involving the JSC.
And can you help us understand how the judicial disciplinary system and criminal justice system interact here? Should the Judicial Conduct Committee, for instance, launch its own inquiry now or wait for the criminal matter to unfold?
The judicial process, the judicial conduct process, has nothing to do with the criminal process. So the criminal process must run its course. But at the same time, it should be that the JSC is going to have to look at this. And because of the seriousness of this case, they should be in a position where they are recommending a tribunal sit in the matter. And if a tribunal is to be convened, then they would also be calling for the suspension of the judge concerned.
But given the seriousness of these allegations, should Judge Phahlane then continue even presiding on any matter at all? Or is it standard for a judge in this position to be placed on special leave?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I think the difficulty is really going to be the part heard matters. So whether the judge has other matters in which she's been sitting and she's part of the way through the case, but hasn't completed the matter. If she is unable to proceed with any other cases, then those litigants in those matters will be compromised. It may be that those matters then have to start again from the beginning, but then those litigants will have to carry the costs, of legal representation starting from the beginning of those matters again. So it doesn't seem ideal that she not be able to finish matters in which she's sitting. But I think that question of suspension is really going to rest on whether the JSC is looking at a tribunal, and if they are looking at a tribunal, then there would be a suspension. They would have to then make the decision as to whether it's suspension in this matter only or suspension in all matters which are part heard, and give some direction to litigants on what they can expect.
Yeah. And Alison, as we wind down our conversation, looking at the bigger picture here, does this case then represent an isolated lapse, or does it highlight deeper vulnerabilities in our judicial system that need urgent reform?
Well, I think we've certainly seen an increase and a steady increase in the number of cases where the conduct of judges is questioned. I think when the system was set up, it was imagined it would be an extremely rare event. But as the Chief Justice said on Annual Judiciary Day, we have seen an increase in the number of cases that are in front of them. And I really think we have to reflect seriously on how that has come about and what we can do to prevent that in the future.
And just out of my own curiosity, Judge Phahlane also told the court that she intends to plead not guilty and that the charges will not stick. Alison, what happens to judicial credibility, especially when an accused judge strongly contests the charges, and how should the public interpret such statements being made?
Everybody is entitled to their day in court. They're entitled to innocence until proven guilty. The judge is entitled to mount a defense. We may find in weeks and months to come that in fact, there is not sufficient evidence, or that she's found not guilty. So we can't really judge any of those things right now. I think what we can say is that the JSC process has to move ahead expeditiously, because that's the process that would really put the judge on suspension, and make sure that whatever is happening here, that other litigants and the courts in general are insulated from what is happening here.